Live here. We are on day 9 of 31 of the 31 days of culture. And if you caught me yesterday, you know that I had to miss Saturday because my mom ended up in the hospital. So I have to, hopefully everyone give me a pass for that one day of not going live. But I'm excited because most of the live days are with my friends during the week. And I want to give my guest today, the person we're going to be talking to about culture, Paul Epstein, we're going to give him the chance to introduce himself while I click a few more buttons and make sure we're live, all the different places that we want to be live. So Paul, tell us who you are, what do you focus on, and what are you hoping we might argue about today?
Argue. I love it. I love it. Well, that's what my family, when I was younger, they used to tell me, because apparently I wouldn't shut up. So what they would say is, well, since he just keeps going and going and going, like Energizer Bunny on the debate, right? So kind of what you said, I'm arguing with everybody, usually about a sports team. So they said, you've got two paths in life. You're either going to be a sales guy or a trial lawyer. It turns out I became a sales guy and I married an attorney. So check and check. So there you go. As far as culture, though, look, I think it's the competitive advantage of all of what I have seen to make business work and life work. And really, I've been in environments where I'll reserve some of the company names, but I've been in some amazing cultures. But I only realized they were amazing because I experienced a lot of the opposite as well. And so, as they say, you learn something from everybody in every place, whether what to do or what not to do. And when you're around some places that maybe are not as proud of the culture, but then you taste that good, that's where you really savor it. But my journey was 15 years as an NFL and NBA executive. So from an entry to an executive level, always in the sales and business development lane. And that really is, you want to talk about culture. I think all departments should take pride in culture, but especially from a sales perspective, where it's just so human centered and you rely so much on passion and purpose and tenacity, and just people need to want to be there. People need to believe in what they do and why they do it. And in sales, that's kind of the 101 stuff. And now, ever since I took this Jerry Maguire leap, you know, I'm a speaker like you, I'm writing books like you. I mean, we're in the same space, brother. So as soon as you extended this invitation, I couldn't think of a place that I'd rather be than right here, right now.
Well, I know you've got this great new book out. Obviously, I got mine coming out at the end of the month, but yeah, let's see. I've got it around here somewhere.
Let's see it.
Pretty awesome. So yeah, I'd have to like pull away here. Let's see, because it's sitting right on top of my book of boxes that I just got. There we go.
Boom.
So there's the book.
There we go. There we go. Beautiful.
All right. Love it.
Heck yeah.
And if you're interested, my book just showed up at my doorstep over the weekend. So for my publisher, I was super excited to get that. But you all can grab it at the end of the month. But, you know, I think what's important, other than finding out where you got that shirt, because it's rocking, buddy.
We're winning Monday, dude. We're winning Monday.
Right, winning Monday.
Let's go.
I love it. I love it. You know, I really believe that, you know, the power of company culture is the ultimate thing, right? The culture is the thing for businesses if you want everyone in the business to be able to achieve whatever it is that they're trying to get out of that business experience, right? So you have employees, and maybe they want to be valued, or maybe they want to be paid well, or maybe they want, you know, some security, or they want to work in a great place. Like, you can think of all the things that our employees want, and then you look at what does the company want out of it, right? And I believe they want performance, they want productivity, they want profits, right? And that might be a business owner, that might be the business in general. But they didn't create the business for employees to feel happy, right? That's something maybe it's nice to have. And employees don't show up to work just because they want their boss to make a profit. But they're all really important things that have to happen in order for everyone to be successful. And the only way I've ever seen this work is when the culture is great. Not just good, but when it's great. And I think that's sort of the recipe. And I believe that's the only way to sort of go. And that's why I've written the books. That's why I like to have these conversations, is I'm always looking for, what do you know, this would be the next question for you, Paul. What do you think makes a great culture?
Well, it's the intersection of everything you just said, because I agree. I think a traditional mindset is, all right, so the company wants the performance and the production and the profits, and then the people want things that are very people friendly. But you and I both know that the best cultures in the world, the gold standards, it's I wouldn't separately describe it the way you did. The reason why cultures are competitive advantage is because they figured out how to make it all like a melting pot and say the company can win and people can win and teams can win and we can smile while we kick butt on the revenue side. Like it's this beautiful intersection. But here's what I know to be true. And I didn't always feel this way. So I've had kind of a 180 shift in the way that I view culture. I was brought up to believe that culture is top down. So show me a great C-suite, I'll show you a great culture. Show me a toxic C-suite, I'll show you a toxic culture. And I think that's partially true. I used to think it was wholly true. And here's how I evolved my mindset. So I used to consult for one of the top airlines in the country. And they've got 120,000 employees, 6,000 positional leaders. I did workshops over a 2-year period with all 6,000 leaders. And people that knew that I worked with them said, so what's their culture like? And I said, I don't know. Who's the leader? What department? What location? What floor of the building? That's the culture. Because when I would visit this airline's HQ, floor 5, they were high-fiving. Floor 6, shh, watch out. Boss is around the corner. And Chris and everyone listening in, floor 5 and 6 weren't just the same company. They were the same department, but a drastically different weather system. And so this taught me that within a grander culture, there isn't one climate. There are infinite microclimates down to the floor of the building, down to the person. So the piece for us, if you really want to be a culture champion, and I would say this to anybody on the front lines, all the way up to a CEO, nobody is immune from this. You have to own your weather system. You have to own that climate. So when you hop on a Zoom or you go into the office, you have 2 choices: warm it up or you cool it off. The question is, are we aware of our own temperature? And when you and I, Chris, can own our temperature and we're constantly warming rooms up, that's a culture that I would bet on. And so the real simple way of thinking about this is top-down culture doesn't scale, local culture does. I believe that all culture is local, and that's a shift that I made over the years.
Yeah, and I love the way you're phrasing that. And I'm a big believer that the owner or that C-level, team, they have to create a culture. They have to at least point you in the right direction, right?
Yep. Set the tone. They're the tone setters.
Exactly. Are we a fast-paced culture? Are we a kumbaya culture? Are we a, whatever the thing is? Because you can see examples of fantastic company culture that are very, very different from each other, right? So there's not one way to do it, but it's very clear what the culture is. Now, I think what's really good news about what you said is that a lot of people come to me after I speak and they will say, I loved everything you said, but.
Yeah.
And I go,
I know what the but is. Yep.
And the but is, my culture sucks. My boss sucks. And I go, but this is what's so great about what you just articulated. There can be a subculture. It's okay if the top culture is toxic and you wouldn't go anywhere near it. But if on floor 5, you can make it a great place for people to work and you can create that subculture and you can, turn that temperature up to sunny and beautiful, like you just said, that is under your control. You can make that place great. Now, ultimately, you can decide if you want to be there long term and you want to go somewhere else. But right now, today, you can impact your subculture. And so hopefully the big culture is the tone is set, the direction is set, almost like I don't want to say like the Titanic, that might be a wrong example, but a big ship has a captain and he or she is saying, we're going to this port, we're going here. There's a gazillion other people and subcultures happening on that ship, on running the engines, making the food, changing the rooms. I mean, all these different things that would happen on a really large ship. The captain has no control over what's happening in the kitchen, right? I mean, they can say we're going to have a positive culture here, or we're going to have a customer service focused culture here, or whatever. But we all know the chef is going to set the culture in the kitchen.
Yep.
And not the captain, right? And so those subcultures I'm so glad you brought that up. It's so, so important.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to the age-old philosophy of controlling the controllables. And we think about mindset, mood, energy, attitude, effort, like all those things that every single person in the world could truly take ownership of, regardless of what environment you're in. But I'll tell you, Chris, like I was in environments, especially early in my sports days, where, you know, I wasn't maybe a massive fan of the global culture, but being in this sales room, and often, I mean, those of us that have seen the movie Boiler Room, it kind of did remind me of that. You know, it was a phone pit. And sometimes we were in a different part of the building, which initially I thought sucked. But then eventually I was like, oh my gosh, this can be kind of a competitive advantage. Because sometimes, and I'm talking to the managers, the supervisors, kind of that front line, but you're now in positional leadership. This can be a beautiful thing because you might not always love the global culture, but sometimes you insulate. You kind of create your own world. You create your own weather system. So for me, I had a 12-person sales team. It was a small and mighty team. We were in a different part of the NBA arena, and we created our own microculture. And whereas I used to think it was a weakness to be detached from, quote unquote, the mothership, then it's like, all right, well, let's flip this. And who do we want to be? And yeah, sure, we had to conform a little bit when we plugged into the bigger box. But for us, it's like, all right, 3 things we control: work ethic, positivity, coachability. So when I recruited, when we created engagement strategies, when it was about like retention and who do we want to keep, regardless of how many widgets they've sold, it was the people that put their hard hat on and gave us work ethic, positivity, and coachability. My job was to hire the talent and say, I think this person is a gifted seller. And that's why I didn't grind them on performance. I grinded on the 3 controllables, and I was like, there's no 3 strikes and you're out. There's 1 strike, because those 3 things you can do every day. And if you don't, then this isn't going to be where you're going to work. But It's very fair because that's who we're hiring. And you knew that before you signed up. And that's another part of culture. I think, Chris, you and I might have our own, like ice cream, like, hey, Baskin Robbins, you could have your own favorite flavor and I could have a different favorite flavor. But you know what sucks is when somebody doesn't tell you what kind of ice cream they're going to serve. And now you feel a little lost. You feel like you don't have direction. You feel like you don't have clarity. You're like, I don't even know if I want to be here. So my thing about culture is whether it's Paul's flavor, Paul's style, Chris's flavor, Chris's style, let people know what you're serving. Let people know what's expected. And just be crystal clear. Don't sugarcoat it. No pun intended. Don't sugarcoat it, because then people feel misled, and then there's a lack of trust. And now they're going to leave your $10 to make 11 across the street. And physically they show up, but mentally and emotionally, they're not there. They're just getting their check. Right. And so anyways, I think that's important for everyone to know, is whether you're on the employer side or employee side, it's like, dude, just be straightforward. Like, this is who we are. This is what we expect. And if you're worried that it's not going to attract the right people, that it might repel them, I would argue that they were never the right person in the beginning. So, I think I think sometimes we try to cater to the masses instead of delivering like the raw truth of like, this is exactly who we are. And also, I think equally important, this is who we're not.
Yeah. And, no, I think everyone shows up expecting gelato. But when you hand them a big stick instead, they're pretty disappointed. Right. So, we want to be very clear about what we can do, what we expect, what's going to happen. I don't know if we've ever talked about this, but one of the best things I ever did in my companies was to name our meetings, right? So we had different names for different types of meetings. And that immediately, as people began to learn the culture, they knew exactly what was going to be expected of them and what the style and intensity of that meeting would be just by the name. So are you coming to a cockroach meeting or an ostrich meeting or a tiger team meeting or a tsunami planning meeting? You already know the length, the intensity, right? You know whether or not you're just showing up to help someone for 5 minutes to 15 minutes, just for a quick help. Or is this I better show up and be ready to present to the executive team, and this is a big deal, and there's an agenda, right? And so just giving people that expectation help them show up and be better, right? Allowed the leaders to be happier with what people came with, but also brought the anxiety levels down. I mean, I can't tell you how many times people will go, and leaders who want to get caught up will go send a calendar invite on a Friday afternoon or over the weekend because they're just getting caught up and like, hey, I need to meet with you on Monday. Do you know what your employee is thinking all weekend long about? I need to meet with you on Monday and I have no idea what it's about, no agenda. I don't know what. Are you serving me ice cream or are you serving me my pink slip? right? And that kind of thing really, really helps. One of the things I wanted to ask you about, because I know you're a big sports guy.
Yep.
And I'm a big sports guy, and I came from years and years of coaching. I coached a lot of kids for a lot of years. That was something I really enjoyed until I got my own kids, and then I stopped coaching kids. And I had to just sit on the sideline.
Well, you still do it. It's just in a, all right.
But then they ignore you. And I think one of the big lessons I had to learn in business was that I couldn't treat my employees like athletes. Like I could the people, the kids that I coached, or even the adults that I coached at times. That was a different setting, right? An athletic performance, everyone's showing up for this thing, right? It's different. And I brought that energy of being a coach, and I brought the intensity as a coach. And ultimately, I completely shifted my approach for what adults needed, right? And it wasn't coach, because not everyone is into sports, not everyone played on a sports team either, right? So all of that. But I wondered if you had to make any adjustments in how you lead or how you coach, how you train people, because it's different than what the 49ers are doing, right? Than what you might be doing with that airline company who you trained all their leaders.
Yeah. And I think this brings us back to, what game are we playing? Short game or long game? And in sports, and look, I'm not proud to say this, but sports teams are not worried about whether they're going to win tomorrow or next week. It's all about today. And so there's this intentionality in this short game, because that's what works and that's what's expected. And guess what? Depending, like I'm thinking about like NBA as an example, some of these players are on 10-day contracts. Like when I talk about purpose to a guy that like doesn't know where he's going to be in 11 days, like, dude, like pun intended, I'm just trying to win Monday. Stop talking long game to me. So I think there's understanding. Business to me, life to me is all long game, and it's all horizon thinking. And you balance it with this beauty of kind of short term and intention and the outcomes that you want and all that. But, there's two coaching philosophies. There's win at all costs, which is what most sports franchises would adopt, whether they say those words or not. And then there's the philosophy of the score will take care of itself. So I think it's about being clear. Are we a win at all costs culture, or is it a score takes care of itself culture? And I'm speaking of 49ers, Bill Walsh, legendary head coach, and his book, the score will take care of itself. That's where a lot of these thoughts come from. But most of the successful, because here's the thing, notice what I did there. I generalized by saying sports is short-term thinking, business should be long-term thinking. However, most of the greatest sports coaches that we would look to historically, like, even though I'm a USC guy, so shameless plug, fight on, I'll say UCLA on the other side of town, they kind of had this really amazing coach named Coach Wooden, who won literally there may never be a guy or a gal, a coach that wins as many national championships as he won. And he was infamous for taking this long view. And think about that. That's not even professional sports. That's this short window of time where, in this case, these young men that played college basketball, they're only going to be with you for 3 to 4 years. If anyone had an excuse to play the short game, it's somebody that knows my employees are going to turn every 3 to 4 years, whether I like it or not. Short game, win. But he didn't do that. And now we study this pyramid of success, and he talks about all these extremely purposeful mantras and initiatives. Like most leaders in the world would adopt Coach Wooden's philosophy. So he thrived by playing the long game in a short game environment. So we don't need to subscribe to the generalization, but that's really my take. Is I think for everyone out there is just to understand, what game are you playing? I subscribe personally to the score will take care of itself philosophy. And guess what? That's a lot harder. I think the easy way to run a business, not the happy way, not the fulfilled way, not the part that your people are going to love you and you're going to love them. Nope. But like the easy thing is just to like run it through a spreadsheet and KPIs and goals and metrics and like just hit the numbers and perform and produce. That's to me easier. But culture's hard. Culture takes a lot of effort. Culture takes showing up. Go ahead.
We talked about those subcultures. And so for leaders and for managers or whatever label you'd put on yourself, this is what we're talking about. Because A great leader, a great manager will say, I'm going to take the extra 5 minutes here to make sure that person understands why we're going to do what we're going to do. I'm going to spend this extra 10 minutes retraining this person so that next time they're going to be able to do a better job, instead of saying, just do it this way. Don't do that, do this, or you can make so many short-term decisions and maybe turns. And if you don't spend that time educating, really, showing your empathy, connecting with your people, because that takes more work.
Yep.
And you got a lot going on. You got customers doing whatever, yelling at you. Who knows what's happening in that world of work. But I notice those best leaders, man, they just take a little extra time to work on the long term, right?
And here's the thing. Okay. For everyone listening in right now, maybe you are a positional leader at work, maybe you're not. So let me detach from work for a second. The best parents, maybe even more personal, the best friends. Being a great parent, being a great friend, it's not always convenient. It's not always easy. It's those decisions of how you're going to Chris's words, spend that extra, invest the extra 5 minutes, the extra 10 minutes. That's not convenient. That takes more energy. That takes more discipline. That takes more commitment. So people that think that having an excellent culture or being an excellent leader or all these other wonderful things, like that's the opposite of the easy button. It's going to be more work, but those are the costs. Right? Like I want to be considered a great human being. I want to be considered a great friend. I hope to be a great dad. I'm a couple years into the crazy journey. I hope to make my folks proud. Like I hope all these things. That's the hard road. The easy road is to be selfish and just do things for myself and not give a crap about anybody else. But that's like, dude, like human capital, relationship capital. Like we have to be investing in the hard stuff every day because that's the road less traveled.
You're absolutely right. And I guess we could apply this to anywhere in our lives, right? To your diet, your exercise, your friends, the people you surround yourself with, the books you read. I mean, all this stuff. And I think probably the next thing that people might be asking is, well, that's great. You want me to do the extra stuff. You want me to create a better culture, whether it's a subculture or a larger culture. The next question out of their mouth might be the one that I had, which is, I'll do it. I'll change. I'll make my culture whatever it's supposed to be. Now, what is it supposed to be?
Got it.
Right. And that was the question I wrestled with. And I had to read every flipping book, interview as many, hundreds of people on my podcast, go to every conference I could and find that top speaker or that person I thought was really successful and ask them some questions. Right. And start kind of picking people's brain. And I picked up on that there were 7 really distinct things that great cultures always do. They do it in their own way. Again, I'm not saying Amazon is the best culture or Apple's the best culture or Google's the best culture, but there are superior companies and they do some very specific things well, right? Things like transparency, positive leadership, focusing on what makes us unique, right? That could be marketing messages. It could be how we deal with each other as employees, right? Focusing on uniquenesses, not to say what makes us similar. How we deal with mistakes, right? Can we create innovation? Can we get better? You talked about being coachable. I think that's a part of can you come in and be like, yeah, I know I didn't execute this right. What can I do to improve, right? How do we level up that next thing? They know what to measure, right? I mean, they measure and they measure and they measure the right things, not everything. And they have a great recognition program, right? I think I'm missing a pillar. Oh, and listening. They have a mechanism, a way to listen to their employees, to listen to their customers, listen to their vendors, right? So they can listen to their shareholders, so they can make pivots and changes along the way. I don't know if you think I missed anything or if any of those things kind of grabbed your attention, but I'd love to get your thoughts.
Check. I mean, I think universally everything you just said is spot on, but I'll say probably a similar thing, but with my own wrapper and packaging, because I think we all kind of look at it from a different lens. I think that simple wins. So the problem with culture is if I were to Google what culture even means, it would confuse the hell out of me. There's like 1,000 different opinions and 1,000 different ways of looking at it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, dude, I just want something simple that I could apply tomorrow. So here's how I simplify culture. Culture equals how you show up. How you show up are your behaviors, your decisions, and your actions. And then I say, multiply that by consistency. So how do you show up? How consistently do you show up that way? That at scale is going to be your culture. So here's a question I ask for everybody. Think of the greatest leader that you've ever had, the person that you would walk to the end of the earth and back. What did they do? It could be a parent, it could be a coach, it could be a mentor, it could be somebody in business. What did that person do? And I do this all the time in workshops. I ask this question. And so we scribe out responses. They listened, they cared, they were compassionate, and I could keep all these wonderful things, a lot of which you just said, Chris. And here's the beauty. I say, okay, well, the Webster Dictionary says that leadership is about rank, role, title, authority. And I just asked you to describe the greatest leader. And you told me all these wonderful behaviors and actions. Like, which of those do I need rank, role, title, authority? They're like, well, pretty much none of them. I'm like, okay. So the greatest leaders in the world, before they led others, they had to lead themselves. You wouldn't have thought of this person if they weren't effective at leading themselves. So I point at the words that we just wrote and I say, that's the new job description. You want to be a great leader of self, do those things. Be a great listener. Show up with more care. Show up with compassion. Challenge, like give people the hard news versus just what they want to hear. Like all these things that you admire in people, you do it. And that to me is what makes a great culture, when people take ownership of their actions and their behaviors and don't just make this up. Don't guess how you want to show up. Ask yourselves, what traits do you admire the most in other people? Because if that's why you love them, people are going to love you if you do the same stuff. So just do what you have admired in others. And again, that's not easy. That's hard, but that is the way that you can be an effective leader of self. And imagine if in your team and organization, if you had the majority of people that were great at leading themselves, that's a culture that can't lose.
And if you're listening out there and you're saying that sounds great, but it's going to be really, really hard. Well, you know what? Take the list of items and pick the ones that you think feel the most like you, that connect with you the most, that you feel you have a strength in, right? Maybe being a great listener is going to be something you have to work at. Mm-hmm. Fine. Set yourself on your long-term goal, right? This is that, go back to what we were talking about earlier, to be a better listener. But if some of the other attributes where they always gave great recognition, they let other people speak, they, always made me feel like I was trusted, and do those things, right? Yeah. Go do those things first.
And real quick, so a good question to ask. A lot of folks ask, well, what do I love doing? Or what are the traits? Like for me, I would say, passion. Like I love environments that are high energy, that's just who I am. But here's a great question to ask yourself. I'll give a shout out to my boy, Jay Ferrugia. He runs an amazing podcast and I featured him in my book. The reason I'm shouting him out is he has a great question that I'm about to challenge everybody with and invite everybody to answer. And it's, sometimes we have trouble identifying something we're passionate about, or we have too many things and, I love these 20 things. And, but Chris, that sounds like a lot of work. Here's a reframe question. Instead of asking yourself, what do you love doing? The flip is, what do you hate not doing? What do you hate not doing? So in my case, that I'm a high extrovert, love to connect with people, what environments drain my energy and suck the soul straight out? It's low energy, low human connection environments. Like if you locked me in a room by myself, I would die. Like it ain't going to happen. And you have to know that about yourself, right? It's like, what are the environments you thrive in? And if you have trouble answering that, ask yourselves, what environments do you hate? Or what, you kind of have to do this love hate 180 thing. Cause sometimes the hate thing is like, I hate that. Great. Then do the opposite. right? Like, so I just want to present that kind
Mhm.
of 180 because sometimes love is harder to answer than hate. We kind of know what we hate.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and that's a great exercise. I mean, take out a piece of paper, put a line down the middle, and what do you love to do? But what do you also hate to do, right?
Yeah.
And what kind of work do you love to do? What gives you energy? What kind of work drains your energy, right? I mean,
Yep.
those are kind of ways to keep answering that question. And you're right. Ultimately, the things that you don't like, the things that drain your energy, that's the most important things to avoid. Because that just causes so many problems. And I also think people spend a little bit too much time in the things that they like to do, that are, it's okay, it's fine,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're not driving themselves or not getting off on the freeway to the love highway, to the thing they love doing, to say,
Mm.
I love doing that. I need to be more intentional about doing that. Because then then you have less time for the like, and even way less time for the stuff you don't like.
Totally. Yeah. I'd still be in sports if I didn't do exactly what you just said. I loved it at one point, and then my executive coach got me to realize that my love over the years turned into a like. She asked me, what do I love, hate, and tolerate? So tolerate's kind of that middle ground, that ugly middle zone. And I answered all three, and she told me to go deeper on the love bucket, and I described it. And then she asked me what percentage of my time I'm in the love bucket. And I was like, oh my gosh, I told her 20%, which was a lie. It was probably like 10%. And she basically got me to realize that I only love 10% of what I do. And,
Wow.
that when you have that kind of mind blowing, and here's the thing, she said, is your love bucket for your boss, like, would it go up, down, or sideways? And I was like, oh my gosh, my boss is almost all strategy, less people. And people is the part that got me out of bed, and culture was the part that got me out of bed. So she basically got me to realize I don't even want what's next. And that was such a kind of mind-blowing, transformational pivot point that eventually leads to this Jerry Maguire leap out of sports. But it started by being asked these very difficult questions from my executive coach. So I invite everybody to do the love, hate, tolerate thing and ask yourself, what percentage of your day are you in that love bucket? Because if it's a low number, and the higher up the ladder you climb, that number is flat or down, you've really got to ask yourself, so what are you after? And I think a better culture, a better working world is filled with folks that are spending more of their time in the love bucket. It will never be 100%, but 10% really sucked. And so when I found that out, like, you want to make sure that you have a plan to escalate that number wherever you are.
Yeah. Well, if any of this made any sense to anybody, if at least 10% you loved, I would highly suggest first you go check out Paul's book. Let me get back here. Better Decisions Faster. It's a fantastic book. Then you might want to, follow it up with a nice another read, The Power of Company Culture, second edition. I have doubled the size. We've added in 3 amazing case studies with NASA, Neiman Marcus, and VaynerMedia, Gary Vaynerchuk's company. And I'm super excited for everyone to get it. So check it out. Please make sure you go out there and make your cultures better. Be the best leader that you can. And we hope that Paul and I were able to help you a little bit today in making that culture, subculture, day, whatever that moment is for you, a little bit better. And Paul, it's always great to talk to you, buddy. I really appreciate you being here. And hopefully we get to talk again soon.
Yeah. Fired up. Love the time, man.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you later.